Our special report for you right now, heading into the State of the Union. We are going to document a resilient civic fact, often obscured because Trump's movement works hard and spends millions to spin it. But Donald Trump in America is unpopular. He has netted fewer votes in most of the elections he's run in, as you can see here very simply. Most of his political career, he has been leading what is a loyal minority. In 2016, he was down 2 points when everyone had voted. They preferred the alternative of Hillary Clinton. In 2020, he famously lost by over 4 points. He doesn't have much of a majority over time, silent or otherwise. This is a fact in every measurable way. Votes, approval, and polling, he came back there with about 1.5 points. And Trump's chaotic year, since that 1.5 point win, has landed him back in the same weak spot. That's his norm. This low that he's in tonight, that had Republicans talking about enough is enough, this is a far cry from those early claims we heard that the 2024 win was a broad realignment.
Good times, they're ahead. Hopefully lasting transformational change.
President Trump doesn't get credit for the complete realignment of American politics.
President Trump will do nothing that interferes with the success of the country.
The overall agenda, I want to be clear about this, what President Trump is trying to do has significant support.
What is going to be the biggest political phoenix from the ashes story that we have ever seen, ever?
All right, it's chill. If any of those claims were even largely true, Donald Trump would not have crashed down to today's historically low support. By definition, a political realignment would last more than a year. And narratives matter because they shape actions. They get in people's heads. Many debated whether 2024 was either A, more about a rejection of Biden and Harris and their economy, or B, a big embrace of Trump and his plans for the long term, which would certainly mean more than a year. Trump narrowly won by 1.5 points overall, as I showed you. And that is one of the closest finishes in the modern era. You can see little tiny 2024 Trump margin there against the much taller Biden. Let's not even get into Obama. If you want to talk about when he first came charging onto the scene with 7 points, Trump has never gotten half of that margin. So the claim that there was a Republican with a mandate in the country does not apply to any of Trump's races, not the two where he got fewer votes, not the one where he got 1.5 points. And it's now undercut by the enduring fact that, remember, most Americans choose the Democrat for White House races over the Republican most of the time. That is in 7 of the last 9 elections. The blue is usually above. You're looking at a historical fact that the American people usually choose the Democrat. It's the clearest view of the public's preference. If you just want to put all the punditry aside, forget everyone talking on TV and podcasts, and just say, well, what has the public actually been choosing? Usually the Democrat for president. I'm not telling you whether that's good or bad, or you have to agree. I'm just telling you that's what more people have done most of the time. That's the context of Trump trying to claim he's so popular. And if that seems odd or surprising, maybe it's because, one, we have an electoral college, which sometimes puts the number 2 in the White House, which is confusing. You start to think back and kind of forget that, well, Hillary Clinton was actually preferred by more voters. And also, there's a well-funded right-wing media machine. And it insists that Democrats are an out-of-touch, woke, losing minority party. And it says that over and over and over. And the opinion words in there are fine. If you want to just say you don't like them, fine. As for whether they're losing, no. Most of the time, as you see on your screen, including in the Trump era, people choose the Democrat. And the people are also speaking against Trump now. Americans rejecting this term as they've learned about it. It's a reaction to his governing. He's about 15 points underwater. So, here's my point tonight as Trump goes into this State of the Union. He was always an unpopular figure. He began as an unpopular figure. Tonight, he is historically unpopular. He got fewer votes in 2016 and 2020. That's even before we get to the midterms, where it was his type of party leadership that was shellacked. He returned to the White House on a very clear promise to fix something that many people, most people, thought Biden and Harris were doing wrong. That the economy was bad, the prices were too high, they weren't fixing it. That's what he ran on, and Americans now disapprove of Trump's results on that issue.
Without Trump, was hired or rehired to fix the economy, and Americans don't like what's cooking with the economy.
A year ago, when we got these exit polls, it said 45% of voters felt worse off than before economically. Here we are a year later, and what I think we're seeing at least some Democrats succeed on is, how's that going? Are you better off than a year ago? And is this Trump thing working?
This is the first chance we have to be like, okay, voters, like, thumbs up, thumbs down broadly. How are we doing? And it's a big thumbs down.
All of these elections are about affordability.
The public rejecting Trump's record on the economy and affordability. Now, Friday, the Supreme Court rejecting his trade war power grab. And you have those elections that we were talking about at the table, a rejection of Trump's policies, embracing Democrats instead, some of them quite liberal. Now, MAGA allies say Trump still has his own special loyal voting bloc, and you'll hear about that if you talk about the facts that I'm mentioning, that he is historically unpopular, that people don't like Trump, that they didn't vote for him most of the time. Those are facts. Then the young men who did go towards Trump, which was unusual based on how younger voters tend to come out, they're not all staying, but some of them have started to lean blue in those races I mentioned. Now, that didn't cover the whole country, but they do match a return to the norm. Trump is unpopular. Voters have usually preferred the alternative when offered. So it's actually, I got to tell you, pretty remarkable that Trump and his allies have spun a long-running, mediocre electoral hand into claims of this mass realignment, and that tech and business elites seem to perceive and fear that there might be a MAGA permanent majority, that after Trump's lame duck term, which is about 3 years left, they would still have to contend with all of this rather than the measurable reality, which is that Donald Trump has been and remains a largely unpopular leader, now an unpopular lame duck president. And some of his supporters might have gotten kind of high on their own supply, because you can judge for yourself, but we checked the tape. They did seem almost genuinely emotionally shocked that the numbers I just showed you, which are long running, led to their expected result, a 2025 rout, when it was entirely in line with this long, unpopular Trump track record.
How are you feeling this morning? Like, yeah, I can relate.
Look, last night was a disaster.
Last night was a total and complete disaster.
It was an electoral blowout. The results in New Jersey were disastrous. The results in Virginia were terrible.
You destroyed the Republican Party for a generation.
Republicans did not have a good day. So anyone who says, well, not really that, but no, it was bad.
It was not a good day. And maybe for some it was a type of whiplash if you weren't tracking that Trump had this long-term weak support, that the 1.5 that he got in 24 was actually an outlier after many other losses in troubled elections. All of this could drive a larger rout, a blue wave in these midterms. We are in the middle of an interesting moment heading into the State of the Union tomorrow, where the president will make the usual remarks about how the State of the Union is doing. But for Donald Trump, that often means how he's doing. And Trump has plagiarized "Make America Great Again." It was a Reagan slogan. He sounded like Nixon in trying to downplay his approval problems today, claiming there's a silent support out there for him. But he lags behind both of those presidents and all modern presidents who've done 2 terms in their support at this point in the second term. I showed you how short he was when it came to actual elections and margins. This is how short he is against these other 2-termers. He's the least popular second-term president we've had, after squeaking in on a 1.6 margin. He's shorter than them in approval, probably because it's math. He started out shorter. He had less of a base to build on, even though we hear so much from his side about his base. But he's unpopular. Now, Trump has tried to distort that reality. He's abused government power to censor how journalists or comedians mention it. He's launched a record-breaking number of criminal probes, which aren't just revenge, although they are that, to harass perceived critics. You can see we're running out of space on monitoring these attempts, many of them failing in court, but these are also efforts to intimidate others who might not have the position or the lawyers or the stomach for a long-term fight, to distort how people hear about his problems. He's threatened retaliations against media companies as well, and law firms, and colleges. Some have folded in fear. I want to tell you this tonight as we broaden out. Much of Donald Trump's second term has become a kind of live action, cynical exercise in testing how much all of those threats will work, not only against the obvious fact that most appear unconstitutional, but that also against the politically absurd backdrop that I'm telling you about. That this is a leader who does not command even a decent plurality of support, that he is small and short electorally. Doesn't have that as he goes around making these threats, let alone a mandate.
Could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. It will be my great honor to pardon the peaceful January 6th protesters.
Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay?
Knock the crap out of them, would you?
Trump using his government powers to reward political violence, to embrace literal sedition against the United States, violent thugs. It's an embrace of criminality that continues to distort the rule of law today. And if we get through this period, we'll have to have a reckoning for it, whether that is investigations, prosecutions, what some countries do, truth and reconciliation committees, but we'll have to deal with that. He's also combining the power of the White House with the petty hate of routinely posting misogynistic and racist attacks. Former President Obama recently responding to that hateful ape video by noting that most Americans oppose this, which is certainly the case when it comes now to Donald Trump's lame duck presidency. A majority now oppose the actual deportations, filing they are far more lethal, risky, and less effective than his campaign vows. The public also struggling with high prices while watching an administration with the most allegations of gifts, grifting, and bribes ever, a mockery of any vow to drain the swamp. Just as Donald Trump spent really most of the first year of this term fighting an Epstein Files release, which has only drawn heat across the spectrum over another broken promise, all of that operating against the economic reality I mentioned, the very issue that Donald Trump used in 2024, which is the only race when he ever got more votes on the ballot. The public has rejected this record. Much of today, I have talked to you in the special report about these stubborn facts, the results, the indicators that the American people have long opposed Donald Trump and preferred alternatives most of the time. Now I'm mentioning some of the reasons why, particularly in the hardened sort of extreme mode of the second term. And again, that is while he's also still tried to distort whether you find out about this full picture, to censor criticism, to distort coverage of those realities. And yet Trump is now at the low of January 6th level approval. So one could also understandably ask, how much lower would it be if we were in a society that dealt more in facts than it does, if people were learning about these realities without today's very well-funded filters, starting with Fox News, which had to settle a $500 million defamation suit over the way that it platformed MAGA election lies, or the broader emerging MAGA media system that spans from podcasts to big tech to billionaires buying up CBS and more so they can run point on how Trump wants these stories covered. And it ain't covering them accurately like the facts I've mentioned. And amidst all that, Trump's policies are still finding cracks of concern on the right. His bids to abuse government powers to undercut the Constitution and, of course, to do things that undercut what we would call the actual or traditional conservative values, those have drawn scorn from some, even in these safe spaces, apart from any other independent or liberal concern.
There's a list of issues that we asked people what they felt about, and the president is underwater in all but one.
When people thought about ICE, they thought, great, we're going to get rid of the gang members. They didn't think, great, you're going to get rid of a landscaper.
What the is going on with our country? Guys, why am I poor?
I think it is unbelievably dangerous for government to put itself in the position of saying, we're going to decide what speech we like and what we don't.
Do you regret your vote?
Yes, I do. Very much so. I feel shame, guilt, and anger at the same time.
How common is that? I wonder if there's a way we could figure out how many Republicans have turned on the Trump agenda. Well, we have that data. I reminded you how much spin and lie there is about this, but 15% of Republicans now disapprove of Trump's term, along with the much more vast numbers I showed you, which is how he's gotten this low. And then there's that record-breaking mass protest movement we saw across this year, even as federal agents kill people in broad daylight, which see these protests. Brave individuals who really, when you think about it, echo the principles of our nation's founders. A revolt against kings and would-be kings, against abusive government intrusion into the liberties of the people. So here we are. I'll tell you, when we put a report together like this, we write it over time, not all just in one day, and our team works on it. And sometimes I look at it and I think, you know, it is strange to live through this time together with a leader who is so historically unpopular and watch them sometimes wield more impact than others who had actual mandates and public support. There's something that seems really off about that. I bet you feel like that sometimes, if I were guessing. And yet, that is also a very old story, maybe the oldest. King George was not popular. That was kind of the whole point. He just had power until he didn't. When enough people come together to assess a ruler based on what they're doing and their facts, and also discover they have very little support, well, that can begin their downfall. In a lawful democracy, that can be as simple as realizing that you're dealing with an unpopular lame duck whose time is almost up, who is threatening and cajoling because I guess that's one of the only tools he has left, rather than actually summoning a popular movement that isn't there. Or to paraphrase another student of power, some cowards play tough, switch their demeanor. Well, we don't believe you. You need more people. That was Jay-Z addressing a foe who was fake and unpopular. This unpopular leader, Donald Trump, would need a lot more people. And the nation stopped believing him a long time ago.